Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today we have Suzan Baucum, Las Vegas Justice of the Peace, Department 13. But before we go to Judge Baucum, Jim, any rants?
No rants.
You said it all last night.
Yeah, pretty much. I got most everything off my chest last night. Actually, it's just more of, letting the voters understand that I'm very excited about today's show because way too many people, and I'm going to steal your line here, Steve, on this one. You've brought me around to understand that too many people do not pay attention to judges, and they don't do the research, and they don't educate themselves on judges. And judges do impact your life immediately. And our guest today is an outstanding judge, in my opinion, and someone who does a great service to this city. And I'm looking forward to interviewing her so we can get to understand more about the judiciary. It's a very down ticket race, and a lot of people ignore it, or they just vote on a name that they've heard before. They don't take the time to understand who these individuals are, and that's doing a disservice to the judiciary. And people need to understand how important we have 3 branches of government, and too many people ignore the judicial branch. So that's all I have to say, and I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Oh, they're not ignoring it on the Senate floor, let me tell you.
Well, yeah, but okay, so let me rephrase.
They're really reaming her.
let me rephrase. Too many people are concerned about the judicial branch on the U.S. Supreme Court level, which has been over-politicized, in my opinion. And but they don't look at local judges.
True.
So, good catch, Steve.
Not
I rephrase. Pay more attention to your local judges. Supreme Court justices are very important because it's a lifetime appointment, and they don't have to run for re-election.
The U.S. Supreme Court.
Or U.S. Supreme Court, yes. Okay.
Judge Baucum, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, Steve, as you probably know, I was born and raised here in Las Vegas. I went through the public school system. I was a graduate of Western High School a long time ago.
Okay. How long ago? Messing with you.
It's all good. If I have to answer that question, I will. Then I went away to college. I went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Majored in political science. Went to the University of Idaho College of Law. Got my law degree. Came back home.
And here you are.
Here I am. I mean, there are a lot of years between that with different jobs that I've had, but however much you'd like me to expand, I'd be happy to do so.
So before you became judge, just before you became judge, what were you doing before that?
So before I became a judge, I interned at the Ada County Prosecutor's Office in Boise, Idaho, prosecuted both civil and criminal cases. And then I went to work for a law firm in Reno, Nevada. From there, I was the state training specialist for the Nevada Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Provided training programs for judges, attorneys, social workers across the nation, dealing with abuse and neglect of children. While I was in that position, I was approached to throw my hat into the ring for consideration for the position of executive director for the Nevada Law Foundation. It's a program that was started by the Supreme Court of Nevada. I got that job. I served in that capacity for 19 years, providing legal services and funding for abused women and children, senior citizens, and the disadvantaged in our community. It was for statewide, actually. And while I was doing that, in the last year of doing that, I started sitting part-time as a pro tem judge. I wanted to further access to justice, to take it. We'd been working at it from the bottom up. Felt like it needed a little work from the top down, so the two could meet in the middle. And then I an open seat popped up for Las Vegas Justice Court Department 13. I ran in 2010. There were 4 male prosecutors that 3 prosecutors and 1 defense attorney that ran in that race as well. I won.
Okay. I ran. Were you the only woman in that race?
I was the only woman in that race. Okay. Then in 2016, I ran again for re-election. Okay. A woman filed against me. I won again in 2016, and now here we are in 22. Another woman filed against me. And
what do you think
I'm going to win this race, this election too, Steve.
What do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of people think when they watch a judge, there are a lot of reasons people run for election.
Right.
But they think that the job is easy. Perhaps it's easier than what they're currently doing, right? And some people just think it would be fun to be in that position. But they don't really understand the work that it takes to get there.
Right.
The day in and day out.
And you were chief judge for
2 years. I served for chief judges 2 years during the pandemic. But I love my job. I love what I do. I love going to work every single day. I love this community. I raised a family here. And I am dedicated to serving the people of Clark County and the state of Nevada.
Do you have a specialty court that you conduct?
So my first year on the bench, I presided over a civil calendar. And there was a backlog of cases when I took the bench. Another judge and I cleaned up a backlog of civil default judgments, 6,000 in the first 90 days on the bench. We worked 14, 16 hours a day, weekends, holidays, just to get that cleaned up. And then I started presiding over the driving under the influence, the DUI court. And I was there for 10 years. And that was one of the busiest courts.
This town.
One of the busiest courts in the nation. We had started out with 2 judges on that track. And then the numbers had gone up and down a little bit, so they needed to expand the domestic violence program. Needed
another big one in this.
Another big one. Needed another judge there. So I said, well, I'll do the whole caseload. So it was not unusual to have anywhere from 150 to 250 plus cases every single day. And I did that for 10 years. And then in January of this year, another judge wanted to do the DUI calendar, and so I took over a regular criminal track.
Tell us a little bit the job description of a justice of the peace.
Well, a justice of the peace, I mean, as most people probably really don't even know, it's the first court that most people will ever see as a defendant. It could be scary. You know, your life can change at a moment. Good people sometimes make bad choices, and they wind up in the court system. And so we do misdemeanors. We hear felony and gross misdemeanors, prelims. We do bench trials. Our DV courts do jury trials. Our civil calendar, those judges do jury trials as well. So we have a broad range of things that we see in justice court.
So the domestic violence court that you sat on, how did that impact you as a woman?
So I covered the DV calendar a little bit here and there for some of the other judges. I've never been assigned to that calendar. The domestic violence calendar is considered a specialty court in Las Vegas Justice Court, just like the DUI court is considered a specialty court. So while I filled in for some other judges here and there to help out,
was that like heart-wrenching for you?
It's heart-wrenching. It's definitely heart-wrenching. And you really have to, it takes a lot of time. You have to have a lot of patience. And I give the 2 judges that are handling those departments right now a lot of credit, because you really do have to be patient. The tensions run high, volatility, and you just have to be able to keep the courtroom calm. You have to be able to keep everyone before you calm. Attorneys get high-spirited and arguing their cases, as you guys know. And it just has to have a calm demeanor and a good temperament to be a judge.
So the justice of the peace is the one that bound people over to district court, right? If there's sufficient evidence to bound over to district, right?
Right. So it's called a slider marginal evidence. So
what does that mean?
A little bit. It's just a little bit.
That person saw him. That's all.
No, well, in a trial,
Okay.
the prosecutor of the state has to prove their charges beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
So it's a higher burden.
Right.
Slight or marginal is just very minimal.
How important is the rule of evidence?
The rule of evidence is very important.
How would you? Well, what, if you had to go 1 to 10, what would you rate that as? Versus discretion, because judges have this discretion. How important is rule of evidence over discretion?
A 9.
Okay.
Evidence is very important.
You know why he's asking that, right? Because I know where this is going.
Well,
he's leading up to, you're going to fix family court.
No. I'm not even going to go there.
Well, since I have nothing to do with family court,
Judge Baucum.
I have nothing to do with family court.
I didn't say that. He did.
I'm not going to be a family court judge.
Before the horse type of guy.
I did, however, serve as a hearing master, like a court-appointed hearing master, like a pro tem judge in family court to help them out. Oh gosh, 2008, 2009, way back then.
So
that's another heart-wrenching court, family court.
Oh yeah.
Just like domestic violence court, but all courts can be heart-wrenching. You have people that don't know, they don't understand the court system. We see people with mental health issues, and as you guys are aware, we don't have a lot of programs for mental health. The Clark County Detention Center seems to serve as the mental health hotel for so many people who really are undeserving of having to be there and really need assistance and support.
Jury trials, have you done any of those?
I have.
How many?
So I think 2 when I sat as a civil judge. I did a couple prior to taking the bench, and then our DV judges, we thought we're going to be having 9 or 10 jury trials a week. We were all of the rest of us judges were geared up and ready to go. And I think since the legislature put jury trials into effect, there's only been 3 that have gone statewide.
Could you explain the difference between a jury trial and a bench trial?
So a bench trial is heard by the judge. The judge makes the decision. In a jury trial, it is made up of a group of your peers. We started out with 6 in justice court. That's now been expanded to 12 in the domestic violence area. And so a group of your peers are chosen. They make the final decision.
And the litigants are the one that ask for a bench trial versus a jury trial, correct?
The defendants were the litigants, correct.
How important is a jury trial?
Well, I think it's people have a constitutional right to have a jury trial. In Nevada for domestic violence cases. They've tried to expand that in justice court. In municipal court, they now are hearing domestic violence jury trials as well. Of course, there is a constitutional right in a criminal case to have a jury trial, especially if they're seeking a prison term, incarceration according to statute. But I think it's they are important because people should be allowed to choose whether or not they want to be judged by their peers or one individual person.
Have you done contempt hearings before?
I've done a couple. It's been a very long time.
Could you explain to me the difference between a civil contempt and a criminal contempt?
Well, a civil contempt, I guess, I don't really know how to explain it, Steve, to make it easy for our listeners. So if you're held in criminal contempt of court,
I just think it's the same because a jail cell is a jail cell. Civil or criminal, you're still locked up. Your freedom is still taken away from you.
Well, you could be. Yeah. You could be. I mean, you could be locked up in a criminal contempt or civil, or you could be sanctioned. So it could be a monetary sanction. So.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, when it comes to juries, and I'm asking this more for just my information, just your thoughts. So when it comes to jury trials, one of the things that keeps getting brought up to me about how tough it is to get people to actually report to jury duty.
And I think that's true.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, and full disclosure, because I'm really big on that, and I don't care if people get mad at me or whatever. I'll put it out to anybody. I've gotten jury summonses before, and I'm like, oh, not certified mail, can't prove I ever got it, in the trash. I mean, you can open it up and say, yeah, if you don't respond, now if I get the phone call, I'll respond and I'll go. But is there a way that, like, we could just get it to where it's certified mail so more people will
take it seriously?
Yeah, take it seriously.
Well, and that's a question that the jury commissioner, the chief, like Chief Judge Linda Bell, she's in charge of jury services over the district court. They provide jurors. We use their lists to get juries in justice court. Yeah. And it's hard, especially during the pandemic when they had to suspend the jury trials because they couldn't get enough people to respond. Mm-hmm. And if you just have 1 or 2 jury trials that are going and you have a panel of jurors, you might need 60 jurors to cover a couple of different panels. Right. But if you have 8 or 9 or 10, with the number of district courts that we have in our state, trying to get enough individuals to serve on a jury, when you're trying to get a jury panel for 15 juries that could potentially go in one day, that's a lot of people. Yeah. It's a lot of people.
Yeah. I was just asking that just because, just for general information, because that's one thing that, people have brought up to me in the past, are like, I don't pay attention. I just throw it away. Now, honestly, I used to do that. But then the second time I got one, I was like, you know what? I'm interested in the law. Right. I'll go. And if I'm called, I'm called. Usually, I've never been put on one because I don't like my answer.
You just toss it, huh? I actually call, and they kick me off.
Well, the first time I tossed it. The second time I called, and I got kicked off.
Yeah, I called, they kicked me off.
So, Steve, why did they kick you off? Because you're controversial, or they kick you off because they don't need you?
I have no idea why they would even send Steve one.
Yeah, I haven't seen one in years after the last time they kicked me off. Because I really wanted to go. I wanted to be jury foreman. So
I would like to watch you be in a jury.
I would be very thorough.
I bet you would.
I would be extremely thorough, and it wouldn't be a hung jury. It would be all or nothing. That's how I would operate. I don't want a hung jury because it's going to cost taxpayers more money to retry the case all over again, and I didn't want to go there.
It does cost taxpayers a lot of money to do a jury trial, but again, it's a constitutional right, and people should be allowed to exercise that if they want to.
Hey, I'm not taking. What's your favorite constitution anyway?
Amendment, Steve.
What's your favorite amendment? Sorry. Thank you, Jim. That's why I have Jim.
The right to representation of a defendant in a criminal trial. I think that's so necessary.
Somebody told me their favorite constitution is the second, because if you have the second, you have the rest.
Yeah, it's a congressional candidate, and he said, in the way you framed it, I just actually talked to him on Saturday. I said that is the most classic answer I've ever heard, because Steve asked him that question, and he goes, "Well, I would say the first, and then the second takes care of the rest."
Yeah.
And
take care of the rest.
You hear that a lot.
Yes.
You hear that a lot.
So you've been on the bench how long, Judge Baucum?
12 years.
12 years. In those 12 years, what heart-wrenching case, without mentioning any names, what heart-wrenching case have you seen that just really
Steve,
give you sleepless nights?
Because I presided over the driving under the influence calendar for so long, right. So many of those cases that we saw, children being killed as a result of a impaired driver, families being torn apart as a result of a drunk driver. Those cases have always been the toughest for me because that is something that's so preventable, right? I mean, it's not like it was back in the old days where if you went to a bar and you had several cocktails, you had to find a quarter, a pay phone, and you had to make a telephone call, right? Today, we have cell phones, and you just scroll through. You can call Uber, you can call Lyft, you can get a cab. It's so easy. It's so easy. And that's what I always try to impart to our young people, and why I do so much community outreach, in the middle schools, high schools, college, with athletes, sports athletes, because I just want to remind them that they have a choice. And the best choice is just to never get behind the wheel of a vehicle if you're impaired. And if you're the designated driver, you need to make sure you are the designated driver, because that is something that happens to good people who just make a bad choice or an instantaneous decision. They think that they're okay. And I've presided over thousands and thousands of those cases, and those are very heart-wrenching.
And it's bad on both sides, because the person that actually did do it didn't mean to do it.
No. When you see young people, college students that may have never gone out before and done this, and one night they decide that they're the driver, and somebody gets killed or injured, and then their life is ruined too. The families are torn apart, the community is torn apart, and so many people suffer. It's not just, families lose loved ones. Defendants get punished for making a really bad choice, and that's hard. But it also tears the community apart. It's hard on our community to see that over and over again.
Yeah, that's why I've heard different things, but that's one of the things that about the DUI court that I've heard is that there's a couple different things that you typically have to do, and if you go through like the coroner's inquest and you go through the victim's impact panel, and some of the experiences that I've heard about are pretty when they take you into that coroner's office, and I've had friends that have told me when you have to go in there and smell like dead bodies, and you go to the victim impact panel and you hear these stories about 8, 9-year-old kids that somebody made a bad decision, right, and then now their entire family, and then for them personally too.
Right, and it is, and that's why the victim impact panel is really important, because it really hits it home to people. For a first-time DUI, that's one of the requirements. Yeah. And a number of years ago, we instituted the coroner's DUI program as an extra class in the hopes that it would deter future driving under the influence arrests, that people would maybe really get it. And before I ever ordered the coroner's DUI class, my staff and we went down and we sat through that program at the coroner's office, and we heard the stories, we watched the videos, we saw the horrific things that have happened to people. And then you go in and there are bodies that are laid out that are right there with names on a chalkboard, and it's extremely impactful. And I think that, I can tell you that for me personally, when I saw that, it was never would I ever again even have a sip of an alcoholic beverage and get behind the wheel of a vehicle. Ever. And I just don't do it.
Do you think jail or prison, somebody that made a choice to get behind the wheel of a vehicle and ended up harming somebody else, do you think jail or prison makes that person into a criminal after they've been sentenced for X, Y, and Z?
And Stephen, that's a really hard question for me to answer, because the people who have lost loved ones, they feel like they need some sort of closure. Yeah. And that incarceration of the person that took their loved one from them. That's what our justice system allows. That's what's provided for by statute. But does that then turn that first-time offender into a criminal? I can't answer that. I haven't been there. I don't know. I mean, certainly there are a lot of good programs that they have now when people are incarcerated. There are great programs to help people when they get out. You know, I mean, John Ponder and the Hope for Prisoners. I mean, it's just an amazing.
His last graduation, in fact, we both did.
Just an absolutely amazing program. It's just a hard answer to question. You know, a hard question to answer.
Have you visited Clark County Detention Center or the Las Vegas Detention Center?
I have visited the Clark County Detention Center.
When was the last time?
Well, I've been
not as a.
I have
Voluntarily, Judge.
voluntarily, yes. I've never been involuntarily there, right? But as a judge, you know, when I was chief judge, we would have a lot of meetings over there. You'd go in, you know, the doors clang open, clang shut. You have to look up to have your photo seen. You have to show your badge to get through. And it's a very scary kind of place it can be to visit. When growing up here in Las Vegas, we used to do field trips to the jail, and they don't really do those anymore, but they would take us, we'd go down to the jail, we'd go through the court system, we would get to go into the jail, into a jail cell, they'd close it, they'd handcuff you.
What?
All of that, just as part of the whole.
You get handcuffed?
Yeah, on a field trip.
Yeah.
So just as on a field trip.
It's kind of like the Scared Straight program.
Right. And so, you know, I mean, this is going back a long time, Steve, probably for longer than you are old, perhaps.
Yes.
But
I'm a young guy.
You're a young guy.
Yeah.
But there used to be field trips to the Clark County Detention Center. And, you know, we always loved to go on those because you got to go to the jail and see how it worked. And
you got out of the classroom.
And you got out of the classroom. Because we couldn't always just get a field trip to Disneyland, so
right.
It's too expensive.
There were other things as well.
See, I used to like you until you said you graduated from Western. Now I don't know.
Okay, so are you a Valley graduate or
Clark?
Oh, you went to Clark. So Clark was our biggest rival.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a big rivalry. That's for sure.
That's always has been a rivalry between Western and Clark.
Okay. So the reason why I brought up the incarcerating somebody that made a bad choice and now could become a criminal.
Right.
There used to be a boot camp program out there. Is that completely gone?
No, I don't think so. So I think that there are, and usually that happens up in the district court level. They'll be released to some boot camp type programs. Kind of like a less restrictive conservation camps.
I could run one of those programs.
You probably could.
Yeah. When I was in the Marine Corps, they asked me if I wanted to be a drill instructor, but at that time I didn't have the rank to do it, so it just went by on the wayside.
And there are some other programs in the juvenile courts that they do to try to, you know, keep kids from going.
But you don't handle juvenile.
I do not.
Yes.
I don't.
Yes, but do you think there should be a boot camp program for adults?
Steve, I think that any type of program where people can be given a second chance to learn from their mistakes, to go on to be productive members of society, that we should all in the court system, in the justice court system, try to make that happen to the best of our ability.
Okay. Because
I don't think that just because you're convicted of a crime that then you should be considered, oh my gosh, you're a convicted felon, or you were convicted of this or that or something else. People deserve a second chance in life because
they're voting now, convicted felon. We got a convicted felon running for North Las Vegas City Council.
And I think everybody deserves a second chance.
I want to go back to DVs, domestic violence. What's the statute on that from the time the incident happened to the time a person could go and file?
You know, because I don't really handle those cases, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
You need to get Judge Dotson in here, who's running to be retained.
The new
judge, she's handling that.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave all of those questions that you have to let her answer as the judge of that department.
Since you've been Justice of the Peace for 12 years, what have you done to enhance the court?
So, I mean, I think that, like I talked about earlier, cleaning up a backlog of cases, we did that. In the 10 years that I was on the DUI calendar, worked with our community partners to implement programs like the coroner's class. We met with the coroners, we met with all the public defenders, the prosecutors as a whole to try to come up with different ways to keep these types of cases from happening again. And I always try to do outreach in the community, which I do a lot of outreach in the community. Because I think if you can get to people early enough, you can help make a difference later on. Because a lot of children, the first time they take their first drink, they're 11 or 12 years old, and it can continue to spiral from there. And so when people tell me, well, why do you want to talk to the middle schoolers? I want to talk to the middle schoolers because we need to stop it before it happens. One of the best programs I thought that we ever had was the DARE program. And then they stopped that because of funding. They need to bring that back to teach kids about the impacts of drugs and alcohol in their life and what can happen. That program was so important in helping to keep these problems from happening down the road. So a lot of that. And then as chief judge, I mean, I was the pandemic judge, of course, and that was a very difficult time for our community, for our state. And, all of our community partners came together to try to work together as a unit to get better equipment into the courthouse, to go to where we could have Zoom hearings. And we never had that before. So we've made a lot of strides in the last few years to promote access to justice for our community that we didn't have before. And sometimes it takes a terrible thing like a pandemic to say, okay, we're lacking in a lot of these different areas. And so what can we do going forward? So the court system, we're prepared. I mean, now we've got those tools in place. We learned a lot. Our employees learned a lot. And I think it made us closer as a community justice partners, and our community as a whole.
How do you feel about court observers?
I don't mind court observers. Because when the pandemic hit, obviously, people weren't allowed to come into the court. And depending on the size of the courtroom, sometimes it's restricted a little bit because there just isn't the space. But I've never minded having people come into court. I love having the kids come into court and letting them watch the court process and having them asking questions and answer questions. That's always one of my favorite things to do.
So you're a Second Amendment. I mean, you're a Fifth Amendment, right? You believe in the Fifth Amendment?
Of course I do.
Okay. How do you feel about judges carrying at the courthouse?
I know some judges that have carried at the courthouse, Steve.
Say that again, Judge. I didn't hear you.
I know there are judges that have carried at the courthouse, Steve.
Judge Baucum, have we covered everything? That is there anything that you want to get out? Let the people know.
Well, Steve, I just really appreciate you and Jim and the commitment that Veterans in Politics has to the process of getting good candidates elected. You guys spend a lot of time in the community interviewing with these 700 that you're going to be interviewing this election cycle. That's a lot. And that takes a lot of your time away from your families, your lives, to actually provide a good service to the community. So,
well, we like to know the candidates.
I know you do.
Yeah.
And I would like to have your support for my reelection, Steve.
Well, we have an endorsement interview that's going to be coming up.
Well, and I hope that you don't schedule it when I'm out of town. I've given you those dates so that doesn't happen again, right?
Yes. No.
Okay.
It'll be before those dates.
Okay. All right.
Before those days. Jenny, have anything else?
Yeah, I honestly do have one thing to add. And I mean, I'm trying to be fair and balanced. I think it's Fox News that says that, fair and balanced.
Fair and balanced.
I remember just a brief story. One time I'm on the corner of Alta and Shadow Lane. And we were talking before about coming down Vaudeville and how it turns on Alta. So I believe it was when you were running for election. I think it was 2016. So I'm at the red light, and there you are. You're out. One of your signs had fallen down, and you're out there and you're fixing your own sign. And I just randomly roll down my window and go, "Hi, Judge," and you're just kind of like.
Well,
so I really liked it, and I say that because I really like the fact that I'm not going to get into whether judges should be elected or not, because it's the law in the state of Nevada.
That's
and
right.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
So, but no, I just appreciate the fact that you've been on the bench that many years, but you're still out there. You're still hanging signs. You're still coming in here answering questions. We were at Ahern on Saturday, and like you're still out there. Like you could be like a lot of the judges, current incumbents, that are like, oh, well, I already have name recognition, so I'm just going to sit back and not do anything. But you're out there engaging with the public.
Anymore.
Yeah.
No, but Jim, thank you for saying that. I love this community, and as we were raised in this community, it's still in a lot of ways it's a tight-knit community.
Yeah.
And I do put up my own signs. I don't hire somebody to do that. Yeah. I hang a lot of signs. I have equipment that
Let me see your calluses.
I wear gloves, but I have calluses. You see, I don't have any fingernails. They're just kind of all down. No manicures at the moment, right? That stopped during COVID too. But I do put up my own signs. I do campaign, and I campaign hard. Somebody on Saturday came up to me and they said, "Are you in a statewide campaign?" And I said, "No, I'm just a countywide." And they said, "You campaign like you're in a statewide campaign." And I do. Mm-hmm. I campaign hard, but I like to campaign. Mm-hmm. I love to be out in the community. Yeah. I love meeting people. I love knocking on doors. One of my favorite things about campaigning
might be scary knocking on doors.
Is knocking on doors.
I don't recommend judges to go knock on doors.
I always knock on doors, Steve. I like to knock on doors. So what's the worst that can happen? Somebody's going to slam a door in my face, or
there
maybe
are
worse, but
unstable people out there.
It's okay.
Judge Baucum. I wouldn't recommend you do that.
Well, okay, I'll take that into consideration. But I'm a judge. Mm-hmm. I was raised in this community. Mm-hmm. I serve this community, and I want to be a part of the community.
There's one more thing I forgot to mention. Veterans in politics.
Time's not up yet? No, just kidding.
That's what happens when you own the building. Veterans in Veterans in Politics used to sponsor a Shadow a Judge program. And we had high school kids sit in a judge's courtroom, sit up on the bench with the judge. Would you be interested in doing something like that if we decided to bring that program back again?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I would. I've had lots of kids throughout the years that come and sit next to me on, take your kid to work day, and other times of year they come in. A lot of the attorneys, if they have one of their children coming with them, they come up and sit by me. And I love kids. I love teaching the children in our community about the court process. And I do that quite a bit as part of my outreach.
And is it half calendar civil criminal, or you just got full criminal?
No, I have full criminal. So, some of the special settings are 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Some of those that we wouldn't want kids at, but we could certainly take a look at that and get them in there. But I think all of our judges would be amenable to having, our community children come in and sit with us and learn about the process.
Okay. Judge Baucum, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, Steve.
Could you look into the camera, and Mark's going to zoom in on you and tell the folks why they should go and retain you, and your point of contact, please.
Okay. I'm Judge Suzan Baucum, and I am running for re-election in Las Vegas Justice Court, Department 13. I have the most experience of any candidate in this race. I have served this community for more than 30 years, and I am your Las Vegas Justice of the Peace in Department 13. And I would like to ask for your vote to remain so. You can check out my website at www.judgesuzan, and that's with a Z, Suzan, Baucum, Baucum.com. Thank you.
Well, Judge Baucum, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Folks, that's Judge Suzan with a Z, Baucum. She is the Las Vegas Justice of the Peace in Department 13, and we have known her for many years. She's excellent behind the bench. She's fair, she's confident, she's knowledgeable, and we just want everybody to take a look at these candidates and do your homework before you go to the voting booth, because a judge affects your life immediately. Remember that. A judge affects your life immediately. Thank you so much. Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.